So welcome everyone to this local workshop of ours on this microservices project, of which I'll be talking a lot more in the coming hour or so. And with me, I am Tiina Lind-Knutila. I am the project manager from Lingsoft, and I've been leading this project for a year and a half or thereabouts now. And with me today here we have Sebastian Andersson, who will be talking about one of our use cases with neural machine translation. Then Pirjo Kangas from LLibs talking about our e-library use cases, and then Lisa Simina will be showing how to put your own tools into a Docker briefly, and showing what we have done and what you can do in your own server, for example. And then in addition, we have Jarmo Hemminki here, who is also one of our developers, and he's available for questions then at the end. So here is, why doesn't it? Okay, so here is kind of an agenda for our workshop. So basically I will first introduce the project and the European Language Grid platform briefly. We've had longer and more thorough presentations about the ELG by the European Language Grid team in our previous workshops. In the second workshop video is already online, and the other workshop last Friday is on its way to our workshop. So I don't try to repeat kind of the details that the ELG team has to offer, but just kind of provide a brief overview. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we've kind of found uses for these microservices tools via use cases on NMT pre-processing and then online library platform. And then we'll do a bit of demonstrations. And then there's also time for discussion and questions afterwards. So please don't hesitate to ask questions, especially at the end, but I don't mind being interrupted also during my presentation, for example. So just raise your hand and or write in the chat, and I try to answer your questions on the fly as well. But without further ado, let's then go into the actual content of this workshop. So basically, we have had this microservices project it started in March 2021. And these were the projects, or are our project goals. So first, we tried to find suitable open source tools. And then we have tried to both help researchers by packaging these tools ourselves, but also trying to support researchers so that they could package the tools themselves and facilitate the reuse by other developers and researchers. And then we've made the tools available at the European Union's platforms for language technology, so LREC Share and European Language Grid. And then here's the kind of like very compact one slide introduction to the project. So it's a 2-year project, and with us in this project there's Gradient from Spain, then Reykjavik University from Iceland, and University of Tartu from Estonia. So we are kind of spanning quite nicely around Europe. And our original goal was to provide at least 40 tools available. So, well, we provided 60. And in these varying languages, from Spanish to Lithuanian, English, and also some multilingual tools. And then we brought these tools. All of these tools are now accessible at the European Language Grid, where they can be tested for free. And I will also be talking about how to test them and how to get there a little later. And this project has been co-financed by Connecting Europe Facility in the CEF Telecom program. And obviously all opinions and information presented is due to the project and not the European Union. So that's the disclaimer part. So what is the background? The background is such that in Europe, there is a lot of R&D in the language technology field in almost every country, in every language area. And there's quite a bit of open source software available as well. But it is somehow niche and might be kind of just for a particular problem for a particular language. And well, the global players, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Meta, they have limited interest. So tailored solutions are not necessarily always available. So you can get speech recognition, general, but if you need punctuation or some specific field, they don't offer to tailor it necessarily. And here's a chart from the European Language Grid and the European Language Equality Project showing the digital language equality scores for some of the project languages. Unfortunately, it's now the legend is very, very tiny, but at the left most, that's English. So the score is 70,000 and a little over that. And then Spanish is the next one. So it's about half of the score for English. And then Finnish is the next. Again, it's about half of what Spanish had. And then it sort of levels. So that then at the rightmost, we have Faroese, which it has some tools, but quite little. So basically, and these are all languages that we have now covered at least some tools, and try to then make the situation a little better. But this is what the EU aims is trying to level all of this, at least as much as possible. And then open source tools. Usually you get to the state-of-the-art research, and research groups, if they are established and reliable, their tools also are. But then use and modification is often is free of charge. But then how do I find a tool for my problem? Is the documentation enough? And can I get it kind of running on my machine? If it takes a lot of time to get it running, and then it doesn't after all work for my problem, is it kind of worth trying out all of this if I do not know? And if I get it working, will it work on somebody else's computer? So not necessarily. So all of these questions are kind of keeping people from using the NLP tools. So we went with solutions, and one of the solutions is putting all of this software in a container. So basically you package the tool and its software and all of the dependencies, the libraries that are needed in a kind of a container. And then you share it as an image. And usually we talk about Docker is the most typically used. So we also talk about Dockerization and Dockers. And then once you have this kind of an image you can share, then you can get it running easily. And it also makes it easy to have a microservice architecture in which you just put lots of these tools, and then they also have their kind of APIs and well-defined input and output. So you can get tools in a kind of a reasonable way and build systems based on these tools. So this is basically what I already said. So basically the puzzle pieces are now the NLP components in a Docker container. And then you can also have Docker containers that are basically just redirecting your information to a third-party cloud API. So it's also possible that the actual tool is not running. You just create a little proxy that then calls the third-party API. And so basically, then you can add new languages and new functionalities. These tools can be in a language that your your organization wouldn't necessarily support, like we hear in the NMT case. But since it's running there and it's working, then you don't need to care about the kind of the insides that much. And then you can replace those components if you get a newer and better ones. So the European Language Grid, this is the place where we put these tools. So basically it's a scalable platform for language technology assets. And it's European, it's public, and it's meant for the European language technology community. So the idea is that, of course, there are a Hugging Face and there are other of these kinds of platforms, but this one is public. So it shouldn't be on the whims of companies, in a sense. Of course, then when it's public and then there's public money, there might be other issues, but anyway. And then it, in addition to tools that we provided there, it also hosts language resources, corpora, or just information that this corpora or this tool can be found there. Then it also hosts information about European language technology companies and research organizations, and also projects. So for example, Linksoft is there as a company, our project is there, our tools are there. So they're kind of like several linked resources that are there for us and our project. And then these services can be tried out. Those that are there as a running service, they can be tried out via the web UI or via APIs. And I checked yesterday. So yesterday's numbers say that there's kind of like almost 7,200 corpora, almost 3,700 tools and services, then lots of these conceptual resources, models and grammars, organizations and projects, and the numbers are still growing. So the project already ended, but the European Language Grid stays as such. And the European Language Grid also has a very thorough and updated documentation, which is available for both of the consumers of the ELG tools, or if you want to become a provider of new language resources or technologies, or if you want to, you notice that your team is doing something NLP related, but you are not there, so you can go and add yourselves there. And then European Language Grid team, along with the European Language Equality team, they also publish, I think it's bi-monthly newsletter on European language technology. So here in the link, there's the archive, but you can also order it. And they have interesting news about both of the kind of like the EU side of things on NLP and then general things as well. So it's worth ordering and following. And actually some of our tools that are originally, or some of the tools that we provided that are originally made by the National Library of Finland were featured in the most recent newsletter. So they also kind of highlight tools there. And then there's also this European Language Equality project, which kind of concentrates on the leveling the playing field between languages, in a sense. Now, European Language Grid project ended last summer, and there were plans on making it a legal entity and plans that it would start being a marketplace. But now it seems that there's this European language data space, which starts, basically they signed the contracts a week or 2 weeks ago, and this LDS will somehow kind of include or interconnect LRECshare, the previous European Language Resource Coordination's repository, and then ELG in some way, so that nothing that goes to ELG is wasted, but they will be integrated in this larger language data space effort, so that at some point possibly companies could actually sell also their services via this space. At the moment, it's not possible yet. Okay, and for our project, we've actually gotten quite a few benefits from being in the European language grid, and I assume that this holds to anybody. So basically, they've advertised us, they've come to our workshops. We get kind of the tools are in one place, and they also provide quite thorough documentation. The APIs are standardized, kind of like inputs, output, and error messages. So when you put your tool in the ELG, there are these certain kind of rules that you must follow to kind of be kind of accepted. And they also have helped us in debugging some things and making services available. Sometimes I think there were some features that they needed to create so that our tools could be added. And then of course it's a kind of a big network. So we are there and we provide tools there, and so should you if you happen to have your tools. And I think in the new EU projects, there's a mandate that the tools must be put available in the language data space or in the AI for EU or the ELG. So one of these is a must. So that helps if you kind of prepare in advance. So what have we then made available for the project or by this project? So all of these tools are open source tools by researchers, and we have just made the Dockers and the APIs and tested that they work and put them available. So you should find the information of all of these tools on the ELG pages of the original author. So we are not trying to pretend that we did all of the kind of algorithms there as well. It's just making this available. So we've done named entity recognition, machine translation, sentiment analysis, lots of general linguistics analysis and morphological analysis tools, language models. A question answering system is for Portuguese and Spanish. There's some multilingual tools and text and speech alignment. So multilingual language identification from both text and speech, and then also text and speech alignment and keyword, topic, and register modeling as well. So there's within these 60 tools, there's quite a kind of it's kind of like wide number of tools. Only a few tools that use audio, so it's mostly text-based, but we have a few. And Linksoft then provided these tools, and then there's kind of quite a few languages. So there's the Caldia line, Heliot's language identification tool, which is quite practical, and then also parsers and named entity recognition in 3 languages, sentiment analysis, and then Latvian and Lithuanian were also on our table, so to say, for these Dockers. And so where can you then find these tools? So we have a project web page. It's quite uglily split there, but if you kind of Google microservices at your service, you end up at our project website. So we have a table of project results that lists all of these tools, and then there's a link to the Docker Hub, and then ELG catalog describing all of these tools, and the short descriptions and original creators and the partner who created it. And then on the European language grid, we have our ELG project page, and then there's a separate tab for related LRTs and projects, under which all of these tools can also be found. And registered users can test all tools, and you can also download the Docker images from ELG. We'll have, I'll show it later how it looks like and a few demos. So there's that part. And then, yes, so basically this is what it looks like. So you look at them and then there's a list. This is just a screenshot. And then if you go to one tool, then there's like 4 tabs on overview, downloading and running it, some code samples, and then also for trying it out. So this is basically the kind of the very good side of this project, that all of these tools, you don't need to download anything. You just need to create an account and try it out, and then you can kind of at least check that it does work. And then in addition to ELG, the ELRIC Share, which is the European Language Resource Coordination's sort of a slightly maybe outdated repository. So basically there's a kind of a faceted search with which you can find all of our tools. And then these records kind of have links to GitHub or GitLab, where the original source code is, and then to the Docker Hub, where the Docker images are, and then ELG, where it can be tested. So that's kind of the phone book record of everything there then at the ELRIC Share. And let's go then move into the part of the integration. So basically part of this project, it wasn't just put these tools into use, it was also to put them, try to find use cases for them and try them out there and then tell about these use cases. So this is now that part of the presentation of our workshop where we'll kind of now describe in detail where these tools have helped us. So there's a kind of a quick summary slide first before I let others to talk about. So basically we have now worked with Heliot, the text language identification tool, Caldi-Align, the text and audio alignment tool at the eLibrary platform, and then named entity recognition. And now I will let Sebastian to take over and then talk about this language identification in the NMT pre-processing. I'll stop my sharing and you can start, Sebastian. Thank you.
Thank you. I managed to find the mute button there. Now let's see, there's 3 dots. That seems promising. Not promising enough. There is the share screen. That's very promising. There. And there we have the screen. And I fire up the slideshow. This is will be a presentation then about the language identification tool in NMT pre-processing, neural machine translation. So we had, let's see, I'll move this little guy there. So we had our Finnish-Swedish machine translation in production, seemed generally very helpful. We translated lots and lots of materials with it on a daily basis. Sometimes you always get a complaint about quality from the translators. It's not always that you can do anything about it. But we noticed a pattern that was arising, that they were complaining that the Finnish-Swedish translations were sometimes translated into English. And if it happens once, then that's a coincidence. It can happen. But when it starts to happen many times, you start wondering, is this really true? And after some investigation, then we can conclude that yes, it is true. For a particular one customer, this was very common. And then we come to the challenge of volume, where we try to figure out why is this the case. And we train these models with roughly 100 million words. And 1% of that is 1 million words. Those volumes, those type of volumes are not feasible to review manually. So if you want to do something about those type of volumes, you need to have automatic solutions. We did spot checks and sort of we did understand that the reason why we translated into English instead of Swedish was because we actually had Finnish-English translations among the Finnish-Swedish translations, so that our models had learned sort of to translate both into Swedish and into English at the same time, unintentionally and somewhat randomly selected afterwards. So then we needed better language identification. We already knew from the beginning that we need to clean these texts, and we had cleaned these texts, so we thought they were pretty clean. But again, pointing upwards there, that 1% difference is many words. And it's not so trivial with English and Swedish, because English is an expected part of many Swedish sentences. Either there could be an English organization, there can be a movie title that we rarely translate nowadays, and there can be quotations from an English source. Very many English words and Swedish word forms, they are the same. They don't mean the same always. Often they mean the same, but not always. So taxi means the same, under means the same, in actually almost means the same, and so on. So it's not trivial tasks to do Swedish English language detection. And then you have also the additional problems that what's the language of a list of a person names, for example. So those were the challenges that we found. And Heliots, this tool that we found as part of CEF, turned out to be precisely that 1% better than our old tool. And before we had this problem, we thought that our old tool was pretty okay. We probably get away with it, but no, with those type of volumes, we don't get away with it. We need near perfect language identification tools. So we integrated these Heliots tools in the microservice way. So we packaged it on a Docker image, added an API. This was a solution that suited the researchers, that they wanted to be able to share this tool continuously in an easy way with the rest of the research community. And it suited us at Linksoft very well, because it was easily integratable with the rest of our tools, despite that language identification tool is in Java, and most of the rest of our tools was in C or Python. So just as a illustration of the architecture, we didn't change anything in the architecture. We just changed this Heliots Docker instead of our old instead of our old lead component. And then it's up and running nowadays and works exactly the way we hoped. And I believe the next use case here is Ellipse. So I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Sebastian. And now Pirjo Kangas from Ellipse can then start that side of finding NLP tools for the e-library platform.
Yes, I'll start sharing and presenting here. Okay, now I believe it's running as it should. So hi everyone, as Tina already mentioned, my name is Pirjo Kangas and I work as an account manager at Ellipse, which I will present shortly. So my perspective is maybe more on the project management goals type. I'm not a developer myself, but of course I will also be explaining about what has been done with the tools. So a few words about Ellipse. So we are a company specializing in the sale, marketing and technology of ebooks, audiobooks and other kinds of content, and we are part of the Linksoft group, and we are especially focused on library business. So we are the main provider of e-library services platforms in Finland. And when it's about ebooks and audiobooks, so the basic thing we do is we enable the user to listen and read to the books. But of course, there are many services you need for that kind of things. So we have our online store where you can buy books, and then we have a separate library platform where library customers can read books. And then we also have an app both for Android and iOS. And all our services have built-in ebook and audiobook readers. And when we come to the question of what can microservices NLP tools can be used for at Ellipse, or how they can help us. So I would like to remind everyone that there are different aspects where you can use these tools. So first of all, we have a lot of metadata linked with books. And then also we have the actual books in different file formats, both audio and ebooks. And then of course we have all these players and services where you can integrate different kinds of tools. So we have experimented a few things during this project. Currently, all these use cases are basically in the status that we have a proof of concept, but we haven't actually yet implemented all those things, but we have already learned that these tools could be useful for us. So the first use case is text language identification, and this is actually linked with the same tool and the same kind of thing that Sebastian was just talking to us about. So here the tool used is also HeliOt. So how it could be used at Ellipse is first of all that you can do language checks for books and metadata. So first of all, you can check that the book and its description texts are in the language indicated by the metadata. And also, as we share metadata for libraries and different things of the metadata are used in our services, so it's also important that the metadata has correct language codes. And in some cases, we might state that like a Finnish language book is actually in English or Swedish. So we could do a check and see if there are any mistakes. We could check them with a book title or description and see if the metadata is correct. In practice, this would mean that we would take a set of books and call the HeliOt via the API, and then we make corrections based on results and get more accurate metadata. And of course, even the information that we would mostly have, these things would be correct. So that would be a nice thing to know that the information is correct. Second use case is linked with aligning text and audio. And here we used microservices tool called Caldi Align, which aligns text and audio. So the purpose of this experiment was ultimately that we could align ebooks and audiobooks so that the reader can switch from text to audio while reading a book. Usually a book is only read at one format, so you either read an ebook or an audiobook, but in some cases the user might want to switch from these two formats. For example, if they first read with their phone and then you go for a run and you would like to continue the same book. And to do this, you need to align the text and audio so you can actually switch and continue from the place where the reader was left at. And we would like to do this both ways, so from an audiobook to an ebook and vice versa. And there were some challenges linked with this. So I guess the first main thing that you might not originally think about is that actually with ebooks and audiobooks, the content is not like 100% the same, even if it's the same book. So for example, with audiobooks, there are different kinds of opening and closing credits. It's mentioned who the reader is, who the author is, and then the ebook might have different things that you can't really record for an audiobook. For example, there are footnote images, and also there might be some pages where there's like information of the book that will not be read aloud. And also the text might actually contain mentions of the images. So it might be stated that see this image 1 or something, and this might be edited so that it's a bit different with the audiobook where you can't see the image. So this of course might be challenging for different kind of tools. You would need to teach the tool to ignore this kind of things. And also we noticed that some pre-processing would be needed for different kind of characters. For example, if it's a Finnish tool that recognizes Finnish characters, so some other language characters might be sort of surprising. And also with numbers, there might be some things you would need to pre-process so that the alignment process is as smooth as it should be for the final reader. And then the third use case was linked with named entity recognition. And there we used a microservices tool called Turku NLP NER. That's made for Finnish language. And that could be used to improve searchability of an ebook or an audiobook. First of all, audiobooks often lack an index, so you can't check the back of or the end of the book to see what page something is mentioned, a topic, which is quite an important thing in nonfiction especially. So with the named entity recognition tool, it's possible to automate finding named entities from the text. And if we want to do this with audiobooks, so it's important to have these audio timestamps that you know that when in the audio you are actually mentioning this thing. So Caldia line mentioned in the previous slide is also an important part of this. So that actually makes it possible to browse the audiobook, that you have these timestamps and the text is aligned between the ebook and the audiobook. And ultimately, using this would mean that we would have to build a player where the user can browse the book with the named entity recognition terms or keywords. And we are planning to extend this. So far, we have experimented with named entities like place names, people names, etc. I'm going to show it soon. So, but we could extend this to more general keywords using Finto AI or the Linksoft text analysis tool. And the main challenge here is actually determining if a named entity is relevant for the reader. There can be many levels of named entities. But is it important to mention every single one, or maybe like a wider concept? And it might not, of course, be the same for every readers, but in general, we would need to make some decisions based on that what kind of entities would be most relevant. Now I have this demo slide, which is about testing audio and ebook alignment. And this is kind of a plan of how the demo could look. So I'm going to play this bit shortly, but I'll just introduce the bits on this slide. So first of all, there would be the audiobook and the audio, which I'm going to play soon. And then the text is aligned in the ebook reader screen. So this is actually the text that you will hopefully hear soon if the technology works. And then the text bits marked in colors, as everyone listening is probably not a Finnish speaker or doesn't know Finnish. So this is a Finnish text, and the bits marked in colors are either persons, the green texts, or locations, here at this color, and or then time terms mentioning the time, in this case the beginning of March 1792. But okay, now I will play this text. You can follow it from this reader bit, and hopefully it's working.
Eräänä päivänä maaliskuun alkupuolella 1792 oli välskäri, joka siihen aikaan omien puheittensa mukaan oli pulska poika erään Kreivi Terlantinghausenin kamarineidiltä, joka taas oli hyvä ystävä Kreivi Klaus Hornin lakeijan kanssa, saanut hämärän aavistuksen jostakin salaliitosta kuninkaan henkeä vastaan. Välskäri päätti ottaa Ruotsin kohtaloita ohjatakseen ja ilmaista kuninkaalle kaiken, minkä hän tiesi, ja ehkäpä vielä vähän enemmänkin.
Yes. And in the next slide, there's the same text excerpt, and this has a bit more information about the named entities. So the idea is that the text, you could browse the named entities from the text. So for example, times, here the beginning of March 1792, and maybe see what else has happened then. And then there are a few persons mentioned, Duchess Lantingshausen and Klaus Horn, and then one location, Ruotsi, which is Finnish for Sweden. And that way you could browse them. So always the named entities are linked to a certain text position, and there would be audio timestamps too, so that you could even browse it in an audiobook. So yes, this was the last slide for me. If Tina or someone else wants to comment still these slides or the Ellipse project, so you're welcome.
I think you did a great job, Pirjo. Thank you. Thank you. I'll take over then again. Okay, and now you should be seeing the case ellipse intermediate slide. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Pirjo. So those are indeed things that we have tested, not in production yet, but we have learned quite a bit and seen that these tools are kind of, well, they can be put on our own servers as well to try this out, because, well, then you might not want to do everything in the cloud service. But then, okay, mouse from position. So, but basically, I just wanted to kind of also give a few examples where we tried this out, but it didn't quite work. So as it is with these tools, it's not always so easy. So we, in addition to those tools that seem to be now working, we also tried or put the Turku register labeling tool up and running on our servers, and so saw that because we have lots and lots of incoming data, both for the NMT model creation and then also like just for resourcing. So would this register labeling help in those tasks? But unfortunately, well, the tool is there still running and everybody can try it out, but it doesn't seem to yield enough benefits to kind of put it in production. And then also we had a collaborator, another company, try out the Caldialine tool for trying to align news texts with kind of longer radio broadcasts. And for that step, it didn't quite out of the box support searching short texts from a longer audio file. So basically, it might have worked if they had had more time and been able to kind of split the audio in smaller snippets and then build a kind of a separate search functionality. But they said that testing was fast thanks to the easy to access container, and they got it quite easily up and running in their own servers, and then maybe at some point can be used, and at least now they know how to take these NLP tools into use with some. So if there is another tool that might be useful. Okay, so we'll move into the demonstration of our tools. Now I'll first show some of the tools at the ELG, and then Lisa is going to show how it looks on her computer when she's running them locally, because obviously while the cloud service is a good idea, but if you have confidential material or something like that, then you probably want to put it somewhere where it cannot be accessed by others. Although ELG, I think they say that they don't store any information, but it's better be safe in these kinds of situations, right? Yes, so basically, I mentioned earlier that this is available for registered users. So if you have never ever used the European Language Grid before, you can just go to the live European Language Grid EU address, and then the registration is slightly weirdly hidden under the symbol of a human there in the upper right corner. But when you click it, then there is a kind of sign in and then register button. And then when you kind of click that link, then you can fill in your information. So basically what you need is name and email address. And then you'll get a verification email, and then you can try out all of these tools that are there. Then if you want to provide tools, then you need to register as a provider. And well, that's not very complicated either. But then there's at the read the docs documentation, there's lots of information about that. And a little note about these tools is that they are kind of fetched into and started only when you hit the button to kind of send some test material of yours. So on the first time, it takes a little longer before you can get any results. But then if you try it again, like within a short time frame for another text or something, then it's faster. So shouldn't be kind of like get too depressed that, oh, is it always taking this long? It's only taking long on the first time, because then obviously they need to also save resources. And if they are, I think Katrin Mahaineke mentioned last week that they have like 1,700 tools available as services at a European Language Grid. So you can imagine that you can't really put all of those tools up and running and waiting immediately, but it needs to be kind of per request. And well, I have they were kind of like some these are some examples. For example, the Heliots that was mentioned, you can try that out. And then I tried already for the slide this kind of a Turku, the Kaskis restaurant that got a Michelin star now. So I tried a review with this register classification, and it nicely can tell you that it's a review and it's an opinion score. Okay, but at this stage I'll jump into. Okay, I don't now see what I'm sharing. Are you seeing now my ELG tab?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so basically, what I tried here is a bit of news text from Yle about electric cars, and I'll just show how it looks like in different. So if we first try the Finto AI subject indexing. So this is the National Library's Finto AI tool, and we've just built a proxy so that you can try it out from this. And then we hit submit on it, and then it processes for a little while. Wonder how long does it process? It does. All right, there it is. So basically, what you get is then you get 5 keywords that this Finto AI thinks are relevant for this short text snippet. So Uusi kaupunki, so that's the town. Then factories as well. And here you can actually see that this links always to the general Finnish ontology for that particular term. and then manufacturing. And actually here, if we jump into this YSO, this valmistus, which is manufacturing, then actually there are terms here also in English, Northern Sami, and Swedish as well. So in that sense, this is useful also in a sense that you do get this translation of these terms as well. And then production and electric cars. So quite relevant keywords, I would say. And then if we put the same thing, this I ran already so that you don't need to wait so long. So this is now the Turku NLP group's NER, the named entity recognition that we use also for the ellipse case. So for this short text snippet, you get all different kinds of entities. So your green is a date. So we have joulukuu, so December here. And then you have geopolitical location. So Uusikaupunki is here. This in kind of mentioned 3 times in different inflections. And then you have a product. It's also nicely and correctly recognized this light here, 0. And then you have organization. So a light here is organization. So it nicely also separates organizations from products. And then origin, the NORP means kind of nationalities, origins, and something. So the Hollantilainen, so Dutch. So this also quite nicely works. So if you happen to have a use case where you need named entities and you want to be able to search, for example, what kind of products are mentioned in the news, this tool works. And what else? Yes, then also actually, because it's not only Finnish tools that we provided, so we actually, I took a little snippet about an Egyptian mummy from Hufvudstadsbladet, the Swedish newspaper, and then I ran the Swedish named entity recognition on this text. So again, you get measurements here. So it always varies a little bit of what kind of entities each of these tools gives out. So measurements like 128 centimeters tall and 50 years old are some kind of measurements. And then there are locations and names and organizations. And now there's a question. Okay, so Finto AI works in Finnish, Swedish, and English. So there are different endpoints in ELG and also at their own webpage for these 3 languages. Thank you for asking there in the chat. So feel free to ask more questions. I'm glad I noticed it. So yes. So okay, yeah, I can easily show, and let's see. What shall we put as an English text? So okay, so here's the project web page, or the project page in European Language Grid. And now if we go to the Finto AI English, and then try out. And then let's take let's say take something from the Google News. Okay, yes, thank you. Something that is not so unhappy. Google clock update. Let's see what it finds from there. All right, so okay, so I took a little bit of text from the Google clock. Subject fin indexing. All right. And let's see what it finds from this one. Of course, this is based on the Finnish general ontology. So it might, of course, be that it doesn't recognize everything in the kind of like all over the world. But first, it is Google. Badges, buttons, and pens. All right. That's an interesting. Social media. Twitter and internet. All right, yeah, it's not quite as maybe the keywords that would explain what was happening in this text. But I think I suggest you try out yourself as well, so that you can see what are the best tools. And maybe this wasn't the best example, but I wanted a kind of a less militant one. All right, yes, so actually I think this concludes my part now. So I'll be moving to Lisa to let you then share how to package your tool for ELG and how to run the tool in your own environment. So I'll stop sharing and you can start. So Lisa Zimina, our developer, the floor is yours. You are still muted, Lisa.
Yeah, hello. So I'm going to show how to create an ALG compatible service and how to generate a Docker image and how to use all of this and how to create a new service on ELG. First of all, there are detailed tutorials on the ELG website, and today we are going to go through some of them. As an example, let's take a tool called Spacey, specifically for the Lithuanian language in our case. It can do several things, but we'll focus on morphological tagging. So first, you need to do all the installations to install ELG itself and everything required for calling the Spacey library. And then we need to make a Python script, which inherits from the Flask service class of ELG and uses ELG request and response objects. We need to make sure that the API will output the data in one of the required formats. Well, I'll show the output a bit later. And we also need to initialize the service and at the end of while and to create the app variable. So the input to this service would be a simple JSON with some text in Lithuanian. Well, this means Philip lives in Vilnius. And the response should be a JSON with some annotations. Here we see that each token is a token gets certain morphological features, part of speech, lemma, dependency tag, syntactic parent. Well, here it's called head. And then you need to Dockerize the service. So to simplify this process, you can use the ELG command line interface and run this ELG docker create and so on. And it will generate a Docker file and also a file called docker entry point.sh, which is used to start the service inside the container, and requirements file. And then you need to actually build the Docker image. And if you just want to use some ELG tool, you should start from this step, ignoring everything that has been said before. So you can just clone the GitHub folder with the API and build the image, or you can just pull the image from Docker Hub without cloning anything from GitHub. And then you need to run the service on some port. So here you need to replace this port with something, let's say 8000. And well, of course, if you pull the image, you need to write the correct name of the image. So not spacey.lt, but like here before linksoft/spacey and so on. And after that, we can make a test call with curl, and the output would be a JSON that we saw above. So I can demonstrate it. Here, I already pulled the image, so I can just run it on this port. And then I have this curl, and it gives me some JSON with response. Well, not very pretty print, but in fact, yeah, for every token, it gives starting, ending indexes and morphological features, lemma, and part of speech and syntactic parent. But for this particular tool, it is also possible to use a GUI, that is a graphical user interface, since it is a dependency parser. So it would be nice to see a parse tree, but not only a JSON. And the ELG gives such an option. And the easiest way is to go to the folder with configuration files from GitHub and to run Docker Compose Up. So the GUI will be accessible on localhost with port 5080. And we can go there and try some examples. So let's try it in the terminal. Let's hope it works. So it needs some time to start the server locally. Just some more time. Yeah, it started. And then you go to this just localhost 5080. You can type some text in Lithuanian. I guess this way it should work. So the GUI nicely draws a dependency tree and shows the features of each node, and you can click on each node and see the table with more features. Those that actually you've seen in the response JSON before. And since we have this head feature here, it helps us, the GUI, to know what depends on what, so that it can draw a dependency tree. So that was the easiest example of how to create and use an ELG compatible service. I can also show some other example with a service called Aalto-Kaldi forest alignment for the Finnish language. We already spoke about it today. So this is a tool that aligns speech files with their transcripts so that each word is tagged with timestamps. That is actually when this word started and ended in seconds. And we are using this tool in line and ellipse books. So as before, I already, okay, we can just stop all the not necessary dockers. And I already pulled an image, and we can just, again, start it locally on the server. Okay. Yeah, so the feature of this tool is that it's not super easy now to call it with curl because there are so many parameters. So to use it, actually, we need to it's better to use some Python script with all the parameters. And the most important thing here is that we pass the audio file with some speech and the corresponding transcript file. And well, the transcript actually looks like that. So it's a small audio file in our case. And we can run this script by running this, Python. And after some time, it should give us a JSON where each word is tagged with timestamps. Hopefully, it will happen. Yeah, well, while we're waiting, I can show how we can do a similar thing on the ELG web page. Since this tool is already published. Oh yeah, now we have it. So basically it's just token by token, start, timestamp, and timestamp. Yeah, but like if we want to try it maybe in a bit nicer way, we go to ELG landing page of this tool, and we go to this tryout button, and well, I already fed this speech file and transcript, and now we can see how it works.
Pohjantuuli ja aurinko. Pohjantuuli ja aurinko väittelivät, kummalla olisi enemmän voimaa, kun he samalla näkivät kulkijan, jolla oli yllään lämmin takki. Silloin he sopivat, että se on voimakkaampi, joka nopeammin saa kulkijan riisumaan takkinsa.
So yeah, I guess the idea is clear. You kind of can see in real time each word when it is being pronounced. And there were some timestamps here too. And I guess I need to say some words about actually publishing your tool on ELG. So when you're already sure that your tool is compatible and its input and output is according to the ELG requirements, you can go and publish it. So you have to get a provider account on their website, and then you can add a new service or tool here. Then you just fill all the necessary information, and then just save and create the item. So you will be redirected to the landing page of the service. And when the landing page looks good to you, you can submit the service for publication. At that step, the ELG technical team will test and publish the service, and then it will be available for running through the user interface. So with that tryout button. So that was actually all I wanted to say today. Yeah, thanks. And you're muted.
Okay, now I'm not muted anymore, I guess. Yes, so it's back to me then. Thank you, Lisa. Then obviously it's not, there might be kind of a rounds of getting your tool to the ELG if something isn't quite as according to the specifications, or but generally if everything is all right, it is actually that easy and quick to provide the metadata and your tool to the ELG. But I wanted to then also talk a little bit or mention our previous workshops. So we have a dedicated website for our workshops where, well, you've signed up to this one, so hopefully you know, and they are our previous workshops are there as kind of videos, and they should be staying there for quite some while. So how to add an API to your tool and Dockerize it. So we have a whole workshop recording of that. So if you're interested, go and watch it. And then we also had a specific workshop on getting tools to the ELG a year ago in March. There were 2 sessions, and one of them is online. So there's also a kind of a fairly thorough explanation by Ian Roberts from the ELG team about the ELG. So that's also available there. And in addition, yeah, so we had the general workshop last week, and the recording will be available at the workshop website, subtitled, as soon as we can get that done. And then this is the Finland and Scandinavia area workshop. But then if you're interested in the tools of Iberia, Estonia, and Iceland and Faroe Islands, there are still more workshops to come there. And the registration links are at the project workshops website, so you can still join. And also this workshop video will then be on the project workshop website as soon as we get it kind of sorted and subtitled and all of that. And then now it's actually time for questions. So we'll also be collecting feedback via a questionnaire, so please let us know. And then we do have a mandate to report to the, or we need to report to the European Commission how this project went. But we don't really know who's using our tools unless you tell us. So we see, of course, when we will report how many times each of these tools has been tried out, or how many times it has been viewed. So when you go and see them, also that helps in the kind of in the eyes of the European Commission that this project has been useful. But if you happen to find any of these tools particularly useful, or if you have further questions about these tools, or if you actually find a use case and use these tools, or even put it in a good use, it would be awesome to hear about those things. And then you can just email me, and I will not kind of everything will be anonymous unless you tell me that you kind of allow your name or your organization to be mentioned. But otherwise, I'll just kind of compile information in a fairly general way. But now, are there any further questions? We also have Jarmo Hemminki, who has been managing most of the technical stuff and sorting out all of the API requirements throughout the project. So we are here to answer any of your questions, if you have any. But thank you for me. it's been nice to be able to present this to you, but please, now it's time to answer this question, ask and get answered if you have any. So write in the chat or raise your hand. Okay, I actually have a question for you, Lisa. So how fast is filling that metadata for a new tool in ELG? What would you say?
Well, especially if you have some model, like example metadata from some other tool, it was pretty fast. It depends on the tool, really, but in principle, no, I didn't meet any difficulties. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There's a question in the chat that are these models openly accessible for experiments? So each tool has a license information, but I think all of the tools that we provided have a kind of open access license for research and not sure of the commercial use in every case, but at least for kind of research experiments. So everything is so the GitHub, where's the code to build the Dockers is open. The Docker hub has the images, and then ELG also has. So those tools, basically this Finto AI is running as a service at the National Library of Finland service. So I think not sure if they have released the code for the actual service. The ontologies behind are open, and then the Docker our Docker that connects to the Finto AI's own APIs is open. But most of them are very open access. Anything else? Is there somebody who's thinking of putting your own tools in the ELG now? Okay, so there was a kind of an additional question. So we can retrain a model for a different task. So question answering model could be retrained for a different use case. So if the models are available for free, yeah, that's true. Yeah, models versus tools. So some of the models are free, and the question and answering models were for Spanish and Portuguese. So I guess you could retrain them in that language, or then possibly for some near languages if you have additional like transfer learning. But you, in those cases when you need the actual model, then I'm not necessarily the best person to answer how far you can go with each of these models. But if the models is freely available, then obviously you can use it for retraining if you have data to retrain. Okay, further questions? We will be, like I said, we will be then sending a questionnaire later this week to you also. So that will, if you can find a bit of time to answer, that will help us as well. Okay, I think then it's about time to end this workshop. So please be in touch with me if you have any questions or ideas, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you, everyone. I had a thank you slide here.